for being here again.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right.
Good morning,
This meeting is being
everyone.
recorded.
It just now said it. Thank you, everyone, for coming out this morning. I know it's early. I'm glad you're here. Really quick, we're going to have David Miller to jump on the screen, and he's going to do a quick introduction of myself.
So, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. We should be fired up on a Saturday morning. You know, we woke up. Hopefully, we're in good health and good spirits. Again, we are super excited to roll out funding opportunities specifically designed for grassroots organizations in the city of Baltimore. If you check out the Green Light report that really talks about philanthropy, you discover that only 1% of philanthropic dollars in this nation goes to communities of color, and that would constitute all communities of color. And so we know this issue of funding. I'm hearing some background noise. We know that this issue of funding, particularly grassroots organizations of color, both on a local and a national landscape, is an issue. And so the Baltimore City Children and Youth Fund has created an innovative portfolio, if you will, designed to fund grassroots organizations. So we are suggesting to you and your colleagues and other folks, please go to the website. Our team will be putting the email address and the website in the chat. We have a robust selection of offerings from soup to nuts. We got one-on-one attention, small group, anything that you need to complete your application. The other thing is for those groups, because I've had groups, Adam, who have called me and said, well, you know, my organization has never had a budget. You know, we don't know what to do with $50,000. So y'all need to connect with one of our one-on-one TAs so we can tell y'all what to do with $50,000. Because $50,000, Jeanette, I see you smiling, is not a lot of money when you think about staffing and materials. So definitely take advantage of the opportunities. Second thing, really important, and this just came across my desk the other day, there are tremendous funding opportunities in the city of Baltimore. When you think about the ARPA, which is the COVID relief funding, and a lot of the funding that's coming in to support many of the challenges that Baltimore and the state of Maryland have had to navigate during the pandemic. So I'm going to put in the chat a new funding announcement through our partners at the United Way. The United Way is funding for their Boys and Men of Color portfolio. So check it out if you are interested in it. They're having like an RFP session. I'm almost sure it's going to be virtual. I think it's next week and maybe April 26th. So there are opportunities for you guys to seek additional funding outside of BCYF. So I want to turn it over to one of my colleagues, Catrice Alfonso, who makes up part of the Strategic Resources Group. Also want to thank Janine this morning for bringing us in smoothly. And so the session today is really around looking at your narrative. And so we really want you guys to ask questions. We want you to share, and we want you to fully participate. And please make sure before you leave the session, you complete the evaluation. The evaluation is critically important for us as professionals in terms of rolling out these services. And we really want to make sure that the services are specifically designed to support your work. And so definitely complete the evaluation. Folks will be putting that into the chat room. So we're going to turn it over to Catrice.
Again, good morning, everyone. My name is Catrice Alfonso. I will be providing your technical assistance today. Up on the screen, we're going to go over your session results. This is what we want you to walk away with today. We're going to review strategies for developing written responses to your grant application. This is not your traditional grant application. This is more of a question answer. However, you still need to be very thorough in your answers, and you follow the instructions completely like you would do in a regular grant. However, this is a little bit different than the norm. but we're going to get through it. We're going to show you how to develop a quality narrative. We're going to brainstorm points and begin developing responses to your application narrative questions. We're engaged with peers and receive feedback. And we're going to have a little session where there is going to be a little working group, and that's where you're going to get your feedback. And it's not for you to say, when I walk away, this is what I need, this is my proposal, but it's going to give you some little teasers on how to develop a quality application. You can go to the next slide. The next slide.
Okay.
Sorry.
Do you see the agenda, or you want to go into the content?
Agenda, I'm sorry.
Okay. That should be up.
It's not up.
Okay. Just a moment.
It's still on session results.
Okay. Just a moment.
Yeah, sometimes the screen gets stuck. You might need to close out and come back in.
Okay.
Yeah, so you guys bear with us. You know, technology challenges always happen, particularly on a Saturday morning. I don't know why tech challenges always happen on a Saturday morning, but definitely bear with us.
Okay. All right, let's give it another go and see how it.
Got it.
All right. What about now?
It's up. It's correct.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to go over the agenda really quick. Today's agenda, you're getting your welcome and introductions from a variety of people. Adam just gave you the BCYF and TA overview. I really want to, again, encourage everyone to take advantage of the TA overview for this application, and also will benefit you if you want to go after other grant funding. Then we're going to go into some brainstorming, tips on narrative responses, written components of the grant application. And then this is what I was talking about. We're going to do a little practicing where you're actually going to go into groups and practice on developing your narrative. We're going to do some report back out. You're going to get some feedback, wrap up. And again, I can't say enough. We really need you to complete the evaluation. That is very critical. You can go to the next one.
Mm-hmm. You should see before you get started.
It's not up there.
I'm not sure what's happening with the technology today. Bear with us. Okay.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Before we get started, I want you to take just a couple seconds to think of why you're applying for these funds and why is it beneficial for your organization. While you're doing that, I also want you to think about and download the BCYF Grassroots Fund RFP Grants Manual. You need to download the BCYF Technical Assistance Offering, and you need to take advantage of those offerings. And then you also need to download the BCYF's, the rubric. That is all on their website. These are valuable tools. They've developed some really quality work. So if you could go into your chat and really quick in a couple little words, can you put why are you going for this funding? Why is it necessary for you to get these grant funds? And you could put that in the chat. It doesn't need to be a long sentence, just a couple little words. Okay, I see some good stuff. We need to make science operations. Wait a minute, we're always jumping around. We need to make science applications available to communities' children, potential to explain operations for years to come, provide support and resources to youth in the community to increase impact. I like that. I like that. That's really good. To keep doors open for 6 more years. Okay, well, we're gonna go ahead and go to the next screen. You can still keep putting things in there in the chat, but we're gonna move on. Okay, let's brainstorm really quick. One thing you definitely need to think about is what is the problem and why is it important? You may have a good idea and a foundation, fundamentals and about your program first before you begin to address specifics in your application. You need to identify the problem and you need to identify why it's important. A lot of people in grants will identify the problem and it's a common problem, but they don't articulate why it's important in that particular area. So think that's something to brainstorm, and that'll come in handy when you break out in your groups. You need to identify a specific population. It doesn't need to be general. It needs to be very specific. The target population that you're going to work with, it needs to be very specific. You might want to do some geo mapping. You might want to pull some resources. Baltimore City has a wealth of resources that will clearly define your specific population, give you some data on that population. This particular application, there's such a limited amount of space. You may not be able to put a lot of resources in there, but you definitely can put those, go to those resources and get the information that you need. Where is the population located? Are you creating a citywide intervention? With this amount of money, it may be a little difficult to do citywide, but that's where your partnerships will come in, and we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. What do you want your program to accomplish? What are those outcomes you're trying to achieve? How many youth will your intervention serve? That is very critical that you know who you're going to serve and how many young people you're going to serve. And then the last one is, how are you going to deliver services? That's really critical, how you're going to deliver your services. You can go to the next one. Okay, general tips for your application. What I encourage people to do when they write grants is to start out on a Word document. That way, you're not actually working in the application itself. You can spell check, you can grammar check, and all that type of stuff. You want to start using some bullet points to get your thoughts get your thoughts out there. This is, you don't have to write a big thesis, but you just want to get those thoughts out there. If you're working with a team of people, you get that team together and you just throw a bunch of things out there and you want to put that in bullet points. Okay. Use wording from the narrative questions. That's where you learn in school, where you use stems. So if they start, we're going to go over this a little bit later, but if they start a sentence with, I went to, you want to continue, I went to. With a grant reviewer, when we're reviewing proposals, we want to make sure you're following the application itself. So when you use those, that same wording from the narrative, the questions that they have, if you put that in your answer, it keeps us from searching for stuff. Because as a grant reviewer, if I start searching, I'm going to find. Make yourself different from other programs. That's where that geo mapping comes in. It's very critical. Find out what organizations are already out there providing the services that you're providing or you want to provide if you're a new organization, and you need to make yourself different. You need to stand out. There's going to be a lot of people applying for this funding. So you want to say, why do they need to give me the money and why am I different from what's already out there? You need to make sure you follow the guidelines, the funders' guidelines. Read it over and over and over and make sure, and like I said, this is a lot of questions and answers. So you want to specifically answer the question that they're asking. Okay, pay attention to detail. When you write grants, I tell people all the time, writing a grant is like telling a story. It needs to be a story that we can follow. Be careful when you use acronyms and abbreviations. A lot of people seem to do that. Not everybody knows what the acronyms are and abbreviations are. If you do use acronyms and abbreviations, make sure you first spell out what it is so that we clearly understand what it is you're talking about. And then last but not least, you want to proofread, and proofread again. I always tell people, get someone that does not know what it is that you're supposed to do to read your grant. If they can tell you, articulate to you what it is that your grant is supposed to do, what population you're supposed to serve, what geographical area you're targeting, and things like that, you wrote a good proposal. If someone reads your proposal and they're like, well, you said you're going to do this, and I'm not sure about this, and you're going to be on this side. That's not a good proposal. So you want to proofread, and have someone to read it over beyond yourself. You know how when you're reading stuff, you've read it so many times that it just flows, and it may not really be what's on the paper. So get someone that you really don't know to read your proposal and articulate back to you what it is that you think you wrote. Okay. Okay. Excuse me. The grant application is broken down in key areas, and you need to really pay attention to this. In section 2, we're going to talk about this a lot more. You have your organization information, commitment to advancing racial equity, community track record, youth track record. If you're already an existing organization, I would assume you've already been tracking this information. So you want to take that information and put it in your proposal. If you're a new organization, that's when you want to get out there and do that research and see what's going on in the community that you're targeting to serve. Section 3, youth programming, timeline, staff, volunteers, and interns. And we're going to talk about these a lot more in detail. You can go to the next one. Okay, for organizational information, that was that first tab that we talked about. First thing you're going to do is, what is your organizational story? What is the history? What have you been doing? Where have you been doing it? What have been your outcomes and things like that? You want to tell us about your organization. You need to, on the application, it will ask you, when did your organization begin? You need to fill that in. That's where you get to that question and answers. How did it begin? How did your organization start? What sparked that fire that made you say, I want to go out and serve these children in this area and achieve these outcomes? What is your mission and vision and your long-term impact of the organization? When you're looking at the mission and vision, anytime you're writing a grant, you want to look at the grantor's mission and vision as well and make sure you align with that. So for example, this is a slight exaggeration. If you're going out a grant and it's in basket weaving and you do mentoring, that may not be the grant for you. I know that's a major exaggeration, but you just want to make sure everything lines up. So when they're looking at it, it makes sense to them why you're applying for their funding. Okay. And that goes to this next tab right there. How does your organization values align with the values of BCYF? It's all over the website. Please read the website so that everything lines up and it makes clearly sense to the reviewers when they're reviewing your proposal that this makes sense. What does your organization do? Provide an overview of your organizational activities. One thing that I definitely want to point out and make it really clear, and you'll hear me repeat it several times, there's something really critical on this page other than just all the verbiage I just gave. What's, somebody put it in the chat. What's one thing you definitely should pay attention to on this page? Anybody, just throw it in the chat, other than all the stuff that I just said. It's the maximum character count, 2,500, the character count. I know before when I did the training, people were a little confused and they thought it was a page count. It's not page count, it's character count, 2,500. That's when I said at the beginning, you might want to start out with a Word document. That way you can spell check, grammar check, and you also can do a character count. Do not exceed 2,500. Please do not exceed the character count, not word count. You can go to the next one. Commitment to advancing racial equity. This is very critical. This is kind of new in the grant world, and we're hearing a lot more about it. It's the consistent and systematic, fair and just and partial treatment of all individuals, including individuals that belong to underserved communities that have been denied such treatment. So this is new, but you're going to start seeing this across the board in the grant world. So we want to make sure that these underserved communities are achieving what other communities are achieving as well. Okay, on this page again, a critical thing on this page is that word count is 2,500 again. So when you're writing your answer, and you need to pay attention to your word count. Hopefully on, well, all word software has a word count. So you definitely want to check that. You can go to the next one. This right here, I'm not going to read it to you. Take a couple seconds to look over these different columns. They're very critical. And it goes to the equity focus organization. So just take a couple seconds to look at that. You have colorblind, diversity only, race tentative, and equity focused. So you want to get familiar with those different columns. And there's more information that you could do research on those if you're not familiar with it. Like I said, this is new, but it's something that I think is here to stay. You can go to the next one. Okay. This again, I'm not going to read it to you. I'm going to give you a couple minutes to look it over. Stated commitment, race informed, explicit policy, accountability mechanism. So just keep going down that list. And it gives you, again, those different columns that was in the previous slide. Up at the top in the gold color, colorblind, diversity only, race tentative, equity focus. You can go to the next one. Before I go to the next one, I apologize. Does anyone have any questions on those last couple slides? I'm really sorry about that. You can put it in the chat if you have any questions. Or you could just speak out if you want.
Catrice, this is Jeanette. I can talk faster than I can write. I'm good. How are you? Just
Pretty
a quick
good.
question, because I think it's important. There's a big difference between word count and character count.
Yes.
And in your Word document, you know, if you do the have the check, there's actually characters with spaces and there's character without spaces. So which one should people be using as far as the character count?
Adam, correct me if I'm wrong. This includes with spaces. Is that not correct?
I believe it's just the actual letters. I don't believe it's with spaces. I don't
Okay.
believe.
Okay.
So it's the character count without spaces.
He's saying it is without spaces. It's just
Okay.
the letters themselves.
Okay, because that makes a big difference
It definitely does.
when
Definitely
we're
does.
doing this with no spaces. Okay, because that's a lot less. It can be like 1,000 less. I'm looking at one of my documents, and the difference between spaces and not spaces is like 1,000 some cases.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
That's fine. Any other questions with that? Okay, we're going to go to community track record. Tell us what community location you're going to be in Baltimore City. You have North Baltimore, South Baltimore, Northeast Baltimore, Southwest Baltimore, East Baltimore, West Baltimore, and the story goes on. And again, like I said, you can go citywide or central Baltimore. So those are areas that you will have to identify in your application. What specific area are you targeting? Okay. Who are they and how do they interact? That's where you need to learn the community that you plan to serve. If you're not already providing services there and you're a new organization, you need to learn the community that you plan to serve. If you're already there, you need to articulate and explain that community and how you interact with that community. If you're an existing organization, they expect that you've already been doing something there. You have a footprint in that community. How did your relationship start and how is it maintained? That's a very important question. You get a lot of organizations, I work with a lot of organizations, they get a start, but they're not able to maintain. That's called sustainability. So they want you to explain that. And that's also in that 1,250 word count. I mean, character count, I'm sorry, character count. So this means the character count has changed. So if you didn't pay attention, it's not 2,500 anymore. It has changed. Okay. How does your organization engage and accountable to the identified communities and locations? Do you have a footprint and presence in that community? Basically, is what it's asking. And when you go into the application, you'll see how they want you to answer those specific questions in the areas where you will put those answers. Youth track record. Tell us about the children and you serve. If you currently serve them or you're projecting to serve, you need to articulate what that is. It needs to be very detailed. You can't just say children in Baltimore. It needs to be specific. What specific children in Baltimore? Describe your organization's background and experience working with children and youth you serve. What experience do you have? If you're a new organization, what are you projecting that you are going to be able to do and you're going to be able to accomplish? Do you have a youth voice included? Do you have a youth board member? Do you have a teen group or something like that? How are you incorporating? Because when you work with young people, you need to have their voice included in your program. That's very critical. I've developed programs and I present it to kids and they're like, oh, this, Ms. Catrice, this is not gonna work. We don't care about this. This isn't happening in our community. You adults, they always say that you adults think this, but this is how we think. So you need to get that youth voice in your program so that you can clearly understand what's going on now and what will they respond to. All right, you can go to the next one. Youth program, this is the first part of this. There's different ways for you to engage young people. You can have a hybrid that's in person, or hybrid in person and virtual together. You can just do, well, right now it's really hard to do in person with COVID. You could do cyber. So you need to really articulate how you're going to deliver your services. That's pretty much what this is talking about. And this one as well, you need to articulate what technology you plan on using if you're going to do virtual and work with young people. Make sure if you're going to have something virtual, young people have access to computers, or you have a relationship with the library or something like that. I've read proposals where people will say, I'm delivering services, is all going to be virtual. And you go back and we do our research on it, whatever. And you would say 50% of the young kids do not have computers. They don't have Wi-Fi. So you go back to the person, you say, okay, how do you plan to deliver these services? So you need to really explain all of that. Can you scroll this down just a little bit so they can see the character count on this, because it changed. It's back to 2,500. I'm really stressing this because when I review proposals, people don't understand. When you don't follow the instructions, they give me the ability to throw your proposal out. So little things like, well, this isn't a little thing, but things like this, I really stress. If they say 2,500 characters, it needs to be 2,500 characters, because if not, you may not get funded for something like that. And hybrid just means infusing two ways of delivering the services together. And then tell us about the youth program that will take place during the grant period. What programming are you going to do? What are your planned activities? You can't say you're going to have a program and you can't articulate your planned activities. It needs to be clearly precise planned activities that the young people are going to be engaging in. Describe supportive networks and communities that sustain the work. How is your work going to be sustained in that community? Who is going to work with you? How is it going to be delivered? One of the key things here is, what are your plans for youth outreach and recruitment. You cannot have a youth program and you can't reach the young people and you can't get them in the door. We see a lot of programs that it's a stellar program, but they forget about the recruitment and the outreach. And guess what? No one shows up. So you get funding, you get a site visit, and they say, oh, there's only 2 kids here, but you said you're going to serve 30. Well, let's see your recruitment plan. Let's see your outreach plan. And you didn't put any thought in that. You definitely have to have that, because if you have a program, you need them to come to the program. And then how does your program address the whole child and their community? What development of social, economical, culture, and academic skills and competencies will be developed, and how? That goes back to the whole child. You need to address the entire child. And also you need to bridge in, how is that going to address the community as well? You can go to the next one. Before I go to timeline, I've covered a lot of stuff. Any questions, throw them in the chat, or you could just speak out if you have any questions over what we just went over. We went over the youth track record. We went over virtual programming, hybrid programming. Any questions on any of that, or everyone is clear on all of that?
Good
I
morning.
put a question. Oh,
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I
Oh,
put
I
a
was gonna
question in the
say,
chat. Oh,
I was gonna say, somebody asked in the chat about if the slide would be available afterwards.
That's an Adam question. Adam, are you all making the PowerPoint presentations available to the participants after the trainings?
The recordings, yes. I
Oh,
believe.
recordings,
Yeah, but I think if one thing we're trying to do now is to get the presentations on the website with the recording. So yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Anyone else, or did I miss anything in the chat box? All right, really quick, again, before I go to timeline, for youth programming, let's look at the ages. You have 0 to 3, grades P to 2. You have grades 3 to 5, grades 6 to 8, ages 14 to 17, ages 18 to 21, and ages 22 to 24. If you're going to go into that 18 to 24, you definitely need to make sure that there's some experience there, I would recommend. That's a hard population when you start getting to that teen and young adulthood and stuff like that. So, and that's another thing in the application where you have to identify what population are you targeting. So you or your organization need to sit down and come up and say, okay, where's our skill set is? Is it young people, adolescents, or is it young adults? Let's go to the timeline. Provide a timeline of all activities during the grant period. That's all activities from the beginning to the end. You need to include the dates and activities from planning to implementation, closeout, and follow-up. One thing that I would definitely say is make sure you definitely have that follow-up, because if they're asking for it, you'll get people that will write a grant. They will give you the activities. They'll do the planning. They'll do the implementation. They may include closing, but they will forget that the grant is requiring that you have follow-up with the young people that you serve. So that means if you serve the young people, are you going to go back and say, did you achieve this? Are your skill sets changing? Whatever that you wrote, you need to make sure that there's a plan for follow-up. Okay, you can go to the next one. Staff, volunteers, and interns. Describe how you will recruit and support programming staff, volunteers, and interns. That's very critical. How are you going to recruit people to work in your program? How are you going to train them? That is critical. And another thing too that I don't see on here that you definitely want to make sure that you tap into your board of directors. So if you're a nonprofit organization, you're required to have a board of directors. So if you have a board of directors that have a skill set that can support your program, one of their contributions to the organization may be work in the program, review materials, help with your outreach, help with your recruitment, anything like that, you definitely want to make sure that you tie in your board of directors. And then the character count again changed to 1250. So make sure you pay attention to that. You can go to the next. Oh, go back to that really quick. I'm sorry. When you go to interns and stuff like that, one thing that you definitely need to pay attention to interns, if you tap it, Baltimore has a ton of universities and schools, so tap into those college students that need internships and things like that. The only thing is when you bring on an intern, there has to be a qualified person to supervise them. Okay, don't forget about when you have volunteers, you're going to train your volunteers just like you train your staff. Everyone that works in your program should clearly be able to articulate what the program does, how they're going to do it, and what outcomes you hope to achieve. Okay, sorry, I forgot about that. Go ahead. Now let's practice. This is where we're going to get into groups. We're going to practice working on your narrative. You're not going to write a full narrative, but you're going to get in groups and you're going to discuss and come up with maybe some bullets, however you want to do it, so that you can report out what it is you achieved in your group. We have specific questions we want you to address. So we'll break you up in groups based on the questions. You want to tell them how you're going to break them up?
So you just want 2 groups, just based off.
How many people do we have?
20.
20. I would do 2 groups.
Okay. All right. Just a moment.
And we'll sit in on the groups and help out with any guidance and support and answer any questions.
Okay. I am moving people into groups now, and there'll be a member from the SRG team that'll be in that group with you to help you navigate the practice session. Are folks seeing the option to move into a breakout room pop up? Okay, just a moment. Okay, 1, 2. Running. Okay, everyone should have been assigned now. Tiara, I think you should have seen where you could join a group as well, if you're able to move over to that.
Hey, Janina, I don't know if you saw my message earlier, but Tafari was on. And I just wanted to, I was going to log off, but I think Tafari is the host and he's got it.
Okay, yeah, thank you. When I was sharing my screen, I was nervous to click on anything because I thought it would mess something up, but thank you.
No problem. Tafari, you good?
Yep, you broke up a little bit for me, but I heard you said you were about to hop off.
Okay, I was making sure you was good.
Yep, we're good.
All right, bet. All right, y'all. Talk to y'all soon.
All right, thanks, Adam. Have a great weekend. Safari, if I jump over into a group, I can still pull us back out, right? It won't like remove that ability.
No, it shouldn't. And just to make sure of that, no, okay, no, you do have co-host permissions. Yeah, so you should be good to do that.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much.
Yep, no problem.
is being recorded.
You have to leave and go back to the main session.
Alrighty, I think a few more people are just coming back into the main session, and then we're gonna hold space for Catrice, so she can lead us further through the rest of the session. Catrice, are you there? I appreciate you all's patience as we deal with technology. Okay, maybe she's trying to join back on the call. Let's give her about another minute. Okay, so the group that was with Catrice, you all were working on which one of the, were you all doing youth track record?
Organizational information.
Organizational information. So is there anyone that wants to report out how that session went? I guess, you know, like some glows, some lows, and just some insights from that. The questions that were raised on that session. And anyone can report out, and feel free to also utilize the chat as well.
I'll report out. The session was very good. I believe it helped each of us that was in there. I can speak for those of us who asked questions. And, you know, we were instructed on how to tell our story. And one thing that Ms. Catrice said is, you know, when you tell your story, you have the passion is within you. Nobody else can tell your story the way you can tell your story. And she explained to us how, you know, we just tell how we began and tell our story. And she asked each of us to give a narrative on, you know, our story. So
I see Catrice is back with us. So Ms. Hicks was just sharing out about the session and how, like, you know, you tell your own story. So is there anybody else that wants to share what they gained from that session?
She also, you know, we pointed out the importance of sharing positive statistics as well as, you know, identifying the negative statistics that we're focusing on, and to make sure that we can grab the attention of the grant reviewers.
No, that's really good. I'm glad that you all captured that. Just so everyone can hear, in our group, I made it really clear to them. I'm a grant reviewer and a grant writer. And when I do both, I tell people all the time, I can't put your passion in a proposal, nor do I want to. My job is to write the proposal or review the proposal. So if I'm writing for you, you have to be with me step by step so that you can infuse your passion in a proposal. The last thing you want a grant reviewer to do is read a really dry proposal, because we're sitting there bored and we're not gonna pay attention to some things or whatever. So you want that passion and that fire in there. And then the second thing was, when you're using any type of numbers or data, whatever, you want to quantify the data. For example, in our session, we talked about housing. So you just don't want to say, if you're starting your story out, you just don't want to say, well, we identified housing issues. You want to quantify that. How many houses were gone? What time frame did it happen? And things like that. And he did a really good job after I explained that, of changing it and really quantifying his narrative. Anybody else want to report out?
I would like to add something. Being in the organizational information and just like that breakout session really caused me to have to think about how I want to restructure my program, because the One Voice Development Program, initially we served the population 18 to 24-year-old single parents, because that is my passion. That is what I was. I became a single parent at 18 years of age. And I find that young people gravitate towards me, but it's two-part, because not only it kind of discouraged me a little bit. I was like, oh, you said that's the rough population right there. And it is. It is really hard. But we also cater to their children, so I'm trying to see how I can, and especially during the pandemic and how it affected elementary school age children. And so I kind of did a little bit of a pivot during this time. So I'm trying to see exactly how I can restructure the program to incorporate that we serve both populations. And would you say that was okay, or do I need to focus on one?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that you have to focus on one. It sounds like to me that maybe you want to address maybe single mothers, but then remember, they want you to tackle that community. With a single mother, of course, their children is part of that community. So if you're servicing the mother, you would be servicing the child. I think you need to sit down and figure out how much services, if you're only getting a certain amount of money, how much of those resources are going to go to servicing specific needs of the child, because you're looking at the whole child, or you're looking at the whole parent. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, do they need housing? Do they need food? Do they need go back to school? Do they, all that type of stuff. So I would sit down and kind of sketch out, like, what is your focus? What is our mission? What is our vision? What are we trying to accomplish at the end? What's the outcomes we want to walk away with? But I don't think you have to separate the two. You just need to be very specific on what resources you're targeting to the two.
Okay, so I will report out a little. My name is Davita Potts, and I am initially from the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. There and within PG County, I worked informally with single parent households, because I myself came from that type of environment where I worked. I had a son at 18 years of age. I did not finish college. I actually dropped out of college. And so I had to go into a program where I went to business school. I went to culinary arts programs, but things that I could do that would maneuver around my main responsibility, which was a parent. So about 7 years ago, I came here to Baltimore City, and I live in the Hanlon Park area near Mondawmin. And I noticed that there are schools here that don't have like early before and after childcare and things like that to help single parents. Because I had that problem. I didn't have anybody who could keep my child while I went to work early in the morning. And so I'm also a licensed childcare provider. So, and then I have my ServSafe. So I'm like, okay, I see that there's something going on here where we need a place where we can house a program set during the morning and afternoons. There is a before and after care program that focuses on like cultural awareness, and I have a curriculum for children. But during the daytime hours, that space also needs to provide career assessment for these parents. Some of in that demographic, 18 to 24, some of them are still living at home. Some of them might be partnered, but they need to obtain the workforce development and the vocational training to do better for themselves and their children. Our vision is that, there's a reduction in single parent households who are primarily dependent on state welfare programs and federal programs. And so I have the connections along with the board of directors who, we're ready to go, but our primary thing is just to have the building. And I know that this Grassroots grant doesn't necessarily help to obtain the building itself or the property itself, but if you need to develop it, it will do that.
The only thing that I would say, because you listed several things, several focus areas.
Mm-hmm.
I would go back and kind of tailor it down to specifically what it is you want to focus on, because anytime you're talking about children, schools, daycare, whatever, that's where you get into that geo mapping, or you do that needs assessments to see what is already there. Because you don't want to go out there and say in this area they need whatever daycare, and it's already being provided. So you definitely want to do some needs assessments to see what is out there in the different areas that you discussed. And then it may be that you have to do some partnerships. It may not be that you need to be all things to all people. You know what I'm saying? People get nervous with partnerships, but partnerships are a good thing.
I do. There are, within the Baltimore City schools in this area, there are some programs already housed within the schools. Mm-hmm. But they're not meeting all of the needs of the parents. I've done a little bit of market research. They don't have transportation. Like we have a new rec center here. Actually, Cahill. I don't know if you know on this area, but they have it before and after care program, but they don't provide transportation. So in the area schools, somebody actually has to pick the child up from the school and take them to the rec center. And a lot of parents are like, if I have to get off work to come get them, I might as well bring them home. You see? So I see like the need, and I'm just trying to, like I said, restructure my program so that I can meet the need of the community.
Okay. I still would say do a lot of brainstorming and don't replicate what's already there. Build off of the existing structure and merge in partnerships. Did the second group already report out?
No, not yet.
Okay.
We were talking about community track record, but we really spent more time speaking about like the racial equity part.
Oh, okay.
And so just really, I know Monique is probably driving, so I want to honor that. Okay. Okay. You on mute?
I'm looking on the document because I so want to participate. I'm sorry to keep you hanging.
No,
it's not working there. I do apologize.
So one of the questions, since you're driving, I can lift up what one of the questions was, like, how does your organization really take into account like what Black, Brown, Indigenous communities, like the knowledge that already exists, and how your program is really addressing racial equity issues. And one of the things we dialogued about was making sure that we're not really telling people what needs to happen. You know what I mean? So.
I'm not sure if this ties in, but ensuring that the organization, making sure that youth have a voice in the organization and in the programs, on the board, like that there's visibility of the population that you serve. We actually have a former client who is now a board member. So she'll serve as that voice of someone who we assisted in prior years.
And another thing that came up regarding like the race equity, like I said, like not just telling people what they need, but also remembering that certain communities already have had these tools of healing or restoration, right? And throughout like the discourse of history, they often have been stripped of their ability to operationalize what healing, what community looks like for them. And so that was just really the basis of the conversation, to make sure that as people are writing out their programming, that they're mindful of that and asking the people like, what community looks like to them and how they are actually doing whatever it is to be in community with each other. And I think sometimes that does get, taken away. So I wanted to kind of fall back in sharing because I'm a part of the team and I really wanted it to be more. And I know the other person that was on that group had to hop off, unfortunately.
No, I think also if you're a nonprofit and you haven't done a needs assessment, it sounds like what you're saying, there needs to be a needs assessment, because a community can tell you what they need. And the first thing they'll say is, we don't need another program coming here telling us what we need or how we need it. So bringing in that community voice is critical. And then what you just said, if you're going to work with young people, bringing in that youth voice, because you can go in and think you're going to say they need this, that, and the other, but then the young people think they need something else. So you want to, what you're saying is really true. You want to have both of those voices in there, and you want to somehow, in this character count, share that in your proposal.
Patrice, and that's interesting that you said that, because we found lately as we've been planning, we've been going back to those former clients or even people who have DM'd us regarding services and asking them, would this be useful? Do you want this? What would you like to see? And that's been helpful as well, getting their feedback. I mean, they're the people receiving the services.
Well, that also goes back to what I was talking about towards the end of my presentation. You want them to walk through the door too. So you need to do you're already doing your outreach because you're reaching out to them, but then you need to do that recruitment. So if you develop something that they say they don't need, they're not coming. There ain't enough recruitment in the world. So what you're doing, I think, is a great thing. Just track what you're doing though. Whoever you talk to, you track how many people you talk to, you track how many questions you ask, how many answers you got, all that's data collection. So you want to definitely, what you're doing is good, but make sure that's in your data collection.
Thank you.
Anybody else from that group, or do we want to break up into the second? We only have one more. We're going to do another set of questions and we'll report out. Then we'll do questions and answers, and we'll wrap up from there. You want to break us up into another set of groups?
You want to break up because it's only.
How many are left?
It's only a total of 15, but the three of us, well, BCYF admin, and then you and myself. So how would you feel about working as a collective instead of splitting up into a group?
That's fine. Let's just, we could just do the last questions and then just have conversation about them.
Okay. Okay. Let's pull up the. Okay. So you want to do the youth programming part one, just so we're clear on the directions.
Well, we could do that one, or we could do youth track record. That kind of merged together.
Okay. Okay, so let me. I'm gonna try to copy and put the questions in the chat for folks.
Okay.
So what we want for the youth track record, the questions are in the chat. So we kind of want folks to just tell us about, like, how would you tell us about the Children and Youth Services, like describing your organization's background and experience, and how are the voices of youth included in the design, implementation, and or improvement of the programming? I really like that one because what Catrice mentioned earlier is so often we have youth programs, but youth are nowhere to be found except for being on the receiving end of what, oftentimes adults think that they need. And people really are the experts of their own lives, even though they're young people and they still need some guidance, but they have a sense of what they need. So I'm just wondering if people could share how they are incorporating youth voice. I know Monique, you mentioned about a youth is now on the board. And so how do you what does continuity of care look like to keep youth engaged as well? And I think about that continuity of care from like a medical perspective.
Anyone can jump in. We're not going to break up in groups because we've kind of decreased in size.
Yes.
If you don't want to talk, you don't have to. You could just put it in the chat if you don't feel comfortable talking.
I'd like to share. One way that we incorporate youth voices is because we do life lessons using the game of chess. And one way we incorporate youth voices is to allow them to give input, not only when we're playing and talking chess, but also when we're doing our summer programming. And for an example, last year we did summer programming, and we always collaborate or partner with other groups. And we partnered with an African drumming group. And they came out and, you know, they played the African drums, and the young people, they were so intrigued by that drumming and by being able to sit and play the drums as well. And we listen to what they're saying. We listen to how they enjoy the different activities we do. And if it's something that they really enjoy, we know to expand on it for the next session. And these young people, they were so interested in the African drumming aspect of it, and they started talking about field trips, that we said, okay, next year we're not only going to do African drumming, we're going to take them to an African museum. So even within our activities, we listen to what the youth are saying, and we added as an enhancement. If not that year, we added to the next year's program. And we also have within our community, we have young people who give input as to what they would like to see or what they would like to have in our summer programming, especially. With chess, is usually sitting around a board and playing games. But when it comes to our summer programming, we listen to what the young people would like to see, what they would like to have. And field trips is one of the ones that they have definitely added into, you know, something that they would like to see. So we listen to them. And another is exposure to things that they haven't done before. So we listen to the things that they would like to see and the things that they would like to do. So this summer, we're going to take them golfing. We're going to have a team project where we'll take them to an escape room and have them work together as a team and try to figure out how to get out of that escape room. So, you know, a lot of times kids say things, and they may say it, young people, they may say it under their breath or just quietly because they don't think adults are always listening to them. But we always have to make sure that even when they're talking among themselves, that we're paying attention and hearing some of the things they would like, and as well as hearing the things they dislike. And then we just take note of that, and we either add it to our program. If it's something that they don't like, we adjust it, tweak it, or we try to find a way to make it more appealing to them.
Okay, anyone else? I see Monique put in the chat, she said pre-questionnaire, post-questionnaire surveys. Are organizations doing those, especially with young people and community members? They may not want to come out, but they may actually answer a questionnaire, or they may answer a survey, and that will give you viable information. Is anyone taking advantage of any of those?
Yes, we do.
Oh, good. Okay. Anyone else want to comment?
Yes, this is Alex Long with Team Redemption. One of the major ways that we incorporated youth in what we do is actually kind of the whole redesigning and shifting of the program itself. Initially, we started out as a boxing program, but after listening to a lot of the kids' wants and needs, we had tons of kids that would just come to the gym and just watch their friends work out. They wouldn't, you know, interact with the activities themselves, but they would just be in the space. So, you know, talking to the kids and figuring out what they wanted to do, we end up putting in a studio. We partner up with Hood to Hoods, a clothing design across the street from us, and actually start teaching the kids branding and logo design so they can make their own clothing designs to, eventually just make some money for themselves, because ultimately that's all our kids' goals are, to be self-sufficient. So we kind of found a way to make that possible kind of overnight. Not only with partner with Hood to Hoods, but Loyola University and Morgan State taking advantage of some of the surveys. We're actually kind of doing one right now for youth that's 15 to 25, just asking, what really makes them want to carry a firearm in the first place. Just kind of getting to understand the general consensus of how kids are feeling and understanding their mental status. So that's just some of the ways that we kind of incorporated the youth voice and leadership in what we do.
Yeah, that sounds really good. Really good.
Yeah,
Anyone
that's awesome.
else? One thing that I want to mention, just based on the conversation in the small groups and this large group, I hear a lot of people say, I'm hearing a lot of people talk about this developed, or you did this for young people, so you incorporated this and you incorporated that. Make sure that you don't have mission drift. So if your mission and vision is A, don't add all these additional things that take that mission drift and take you away from what it is the original mission and vision was. Because you branded that, it's out there, people know you, you're putting it on proposals, you're putting it on logos, whatever, and then all of a sudden you have, and now we have X. So I'm not saying that you can't do it, just be careful that you go back to that mission and vision and make sure everything lines up with that. We see that a lot.
Patrice, as you mentioned that, another thing that comes to mind is sometimes with youth programs, there's such high turnover. Like maybe the young folks that started out in the beginning are not there like 6 months later or 9 months or a year. And so I'm wondering, how have you all managed to navigate incorporating youth voice when there is a turnover from the youth that were originally there, and making sure that that creates, that interrupts what Patrice lifted up about mission drift as well. So I was just wondering how people have navigated that, or any suggestions that people will offer up in the space.
No, absolutely. With Team Redemption, one of the ways that we was able to deal with kind of the turnover was just the ultimate personal relationships that we did build with our kids, and the partnerships that was established with the surrounding, mentoring and community organizations. So it's kind of like an umbrella created. So even though they may have moved on from our program, the program that they're connected to now is still in a sense connected to us. And a lot of times their younger siblings are now in our spaces because they remember when their brothers and cousins and sisters was there. So they kind of want that same shared experience. So it's kind of like a revolving door almost. It's just continuing to build the relationships with each other in the community to make that happen, so that we always, somebody got their hands on the board, even if it's not us directly.
That sounds really good. That sounds really good. Anyone else?
May I share?
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
So part of our mission is like meeting ladies where they are. And when we say that, we want to be really flexible with people knowing that they're in different mental spaces. So we find that some people are able to commit and they hold on and they stay in contact, and some don't, but that it's okay if they don't, because we have provided what they need at that time. And then the people who don't hold on, like the gentleman just said, they end up kind of circling back around. They come back through because they're going to end up needing assistance again because they didn't hold on to being consistent with coming to financial workshops or something of that nature. So then they need that assistance again. And then maybe that second go around, they end up kind of attaching themselves and really feeling that, okay, this organization is a good fit for me, and getting kind of attached and understanding its significance. But sometimes people are in seasons where they just kind of want the assistance. And then sometimes they're able to really maximize on it, just depending on where they are. But I was just trying to provide as many workshops and services to help equip them so that they don't feel guilty about it, but that they feel embraced when they're able to come back.
No, that sounds good. One question that I have is when the young person comes to get the services and they may venture off and then they come back, are you re-enrolling them and counting them as another number, or is it lingering?
Each program year is separate, if that makes sense. So whoever was last year, they may be a part of this year, but they're counted as a new program client for this particular year.
Okay.
Does that
So
work?
they never come back within the, so like if Catrice came for 2 months and then something happened and I left and I come back in month 5 and 6, am I re-enrolling or am I still present from that first application?
Got it. Okay. So it's interesting because we just came up with a process regarding it. That would be them going back to they would go back to square one of intake. They would have to meet with the head person that they interview with and explain what happened and understand the importance of participation. And then also have the resources that they missed available to them. That's something that we're working on, so that they can kind of play catch up as well, if that makes sense. So if it's within that same year, they would kind of have to do an appeal thing, but not, too strict, but state their case so that they're accountable, that they weren't there and know that it's important.
Okay, that sounds good. That sounds good. The only other thing that I would ask is when they do that initial intake and say, I come back that second time, and they go back and do another intake, are they changing their desired outcomes, or are you working from that original one?
They may change their desired outcomes because with the intake, it's a pre-questionnaire and their application, and then they meet with somebody one-on-one where they do their plan development. So their plan development may change, but we could take that original plan development and kind of tweak it according to what their changes are, just updating it. So they would have their original plan development, but it may change just like anybody else's goals. It could change from day to day too.
Okay. Okay. Any other comments?
I noticed someone put something in the chat, so I'm gonna just take a peek at that.
Okay. Going back to the last person that just spoke, I'm really interested in what you just described. How do you think you would write that up in your narrative? How would you, because that's very interesting what you described. I'm just trying to figure out how would you write it. Do you have any idea?
Well, minimum words, minimum characters. So I'm not going to try to include the whole the process flow of what we do, but we do have it available. So looking at, when you say in the narrative, you're speaking of specifically when we're talking about the design and the improvement, like that particular part?
Yes, and that would lead to your activities and stuff like that on your timeline and stuff like that. So you will write your narrative, but you also need to link that over to your timeline. So in my head, I'm trying to figure out, one, how would you write it? And then how would that map out in your timeline? It doesn't have to be that detailed. She came back and she did this, that, and the other. It would have to be that first overflow. And then you all figure out, what do you do when they come back and stuff like that. I'm just very interested in how that would be written out. That's something to think about when you're writing, because it needs to be really clear to your reviewer.
So I need to include, because we have it written out for the volunteers of what they would do in different scenarios, as far as like a handbook and things of that nature. But you're saying that information would need to be in the grant?
Like if you're writing a grant and you're writing the organizational structure, that sounds pretty clear. And then you go into your programming. So you're saying they have different programs that they could go to. There's an intake process and all that type of stuff. So I'm really kind of trying to think of how you would write that out in your narrative. I think you articulated it. I'm just trying to figure out how you would write it. You clearly said it.
Well, and that's the thing. Sometimes I speak and it's like a lot of detail and kerfuffle. But the smooth, easy process flow of it is that we will receive the referral. The referral will go so the referral is received via email or from DM, and then if they DM us, then they're directed to our email, and then they may also complete an application right on our website, and then it will come to us as well. So it's all generated from the client contacting us. And then from there, we will reach out to them. They will schedule an intake with us. The intake person sits down with them and goes over the pre-questionnaire and the application. And then they're assigned to a volunteer who then works one-on-one with them.
Okay.
So that's like our process flow.
No, you explained it very well. And I'm just in my head, I'm trying to figure out the writing so that it's clear as what you just said. So
you have any suggestions?
I would have to think about it because you're saying
me talking, it makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense what you're saying. And I'm just trying to say, I hope she writes it as clear as what you just said.
Well, my husband is a really good proofreader. So, yeah.
Yeah, you want to edit some more. But no, that sounded good. Janine, did you have something that you wanted to say?
No.
Oh, I thought you were reading a chat.
Yeah, I was trying to just read, and it just looks like, I think Octavia, are you able to expand upon that? It looks like teach them lessons and topics. Okay, so listening to their problems in school while working in the school system. Did you want to expand on that a little more?
As far as, say it again.
Hi. Let me turn my camera.
I just didn't want to like miscapture what you had put in the chat.
All right, so me and my youngest son, we kind of created this program for the youth. It wasn't so much just for like the teenagers, because I was working in the high school at the time. So I would hear a lot of kids complaining while they're walking back and forth through classes, you know, just different things they had going on with them, either at home or with their friends in the community or even at school. So it kind of just made me think like, okay, one, my kids weren't lying because I would hear them all the time about stuff. But now I can hear it through other children that are really having these same problems. And I sat down with my son. I sat down with him and my boyfriend. We came up with the idea that, you know, back to basics youth resource program. They need things that they've taken out of the community and out of the schools. They rec centers, they've taken back, you know, home economics, things that they need to learn on an everyday basis just to survive in life, you know, as they become adults. So, you know, they don't know how to properly pick out their foods and, you know, cook meals. They have siblings that they take care of, you know, they have to take to school or get ready for school, feed them, you know, just make ways for them and their siblings when their, you know, guardians aren't there. So me and my son, we decided to kind of like get their opinions, see how they would go about it. And we wanted to also help them build like communication skills between each other. All of them grew up together, they go to school together, they hang out, but when they hit certain ages, teenagers, like they just depart, they become enemies, they want to fight and just kind of go astray on things. Some of them are struggling, you know, with other issues. They're crying out for attention, but they don't know how to get it. So this is a program to basically show them like, you know, technology isn't always the key to things. You can put that down and build your actual skills with your hands and your mindset. Like build your skills so that way when you can pass it on to someone else, or you can use it to help build your skills and other talents to maintain things better in life. Like we teaching them budgeting with banking, savings account, teaching them how to, you know, create through arts and craft. Like they might be aggressive, they might have anger issues, find calmer ways to like find better ways to calm your anger down through skills that you can build. We actually want to teach them like workshop. We partner with other programs So that way they can find other like ways to escape from problems they're having or to vent. Teaching them home ec stuff, how to sew, cook, clean, properly keep up their hygienes and, other hygienic issues. They properly dress and things like that. So they'll be building up on their resumes with like jobs, doing mock interviewing so that they can be better prepared into the world. But we basically are building it so that when they are teaching it, they're teaching it to their peers for that communication skills as well. They're going to need each other in the futuristic world. So they need to build it now instead of bickering and trying to figure it out later.
That sounds like a good program. So it sounds like to me that you're teaching a lot of life skills. Does that sound right? Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. Okay. Okay. What we're going to do now, we're going to go, because we have a little time left, we're going to spend like 5 minutes with questions and answers. You can fire off questions and hopefully we can answer them for you. So you can either put it in the chat or jump online and ask any questions that you have, anything that we reviewed, you need me to repeat, you don't understand.
So I have a question.
Okay.
Yeah, what do you find as the number one issue when disqualifying a grantee or potential grantees?
As a grant reviewer, not following the instructions.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I'm a local, state, and federal reviewer. I've only done a few foundations, not many, but just really not taking the time to follow the instructions. That's why I really stress, people may think it's silly, I really stress the character count because that is a reason to throw the proposal to the side because you didn't follow the instructions. And if the character count is required, then it needs to be what they require.
And Catrice, the character count is different for depending on the section, right? It's not.
Yes,
okay.
It's not consistent. That's why when it changed, I kept stressing like what's different on this page because it changes. It's not 2,500 on all of them.
And so one thing I know that came up in the previous session was folks were suggesting, and many of you might know, just using like a Word document to type up the content. And that way you can just count what the word count is to assist you with that. Just to avoid any like challenges when you actually do plop it in there. Because it can be frustrating if you're trying to complete the application in there without doing the, like a draft version of it. And so I wouldn't want people to lose their content, lose their work and things of that nature.
And that would also go back to the editing as well. If you put it in Word, you do the character count and you're over, what is most relevant to stay in the proposal? What's the meat and potatoes that you need to leave in there? Anyone else with questions?
I guess for me, I'm kind of a novice at writing grants. I mean, I've done a few, but nothing on a major scale. And so, I mean, I came to this presentation to, learn more in it. And I think I have, I mean, as far as like what you all are looking for. But if you had any suggestions as to any other ways that we could kind of like hone our skills a bit more. I know you're going to be putting up a YouTube video at some point, but I mean, do you have any other suggestions? Should we bring in grant writers to say, for instance, I don't know, provide assistance, instruction, or are there sites that we can go out to, training, what have you?
Well, I would say take advantage of all the technical assistance in as many of the sessions that you can sit in.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have one-on-one.
Yeah.
So if you write your proposal, please take advantage of the one-on-one.
Okay.
So they can sit down and review your material. As far as a grant writer, I can't really comment on that. That's a personal choice. Only thing that I would caution you with is you cannot write the grant writer in your proposal.
Mm-hmm.
That's a myth that people think they can do. Because if I'm giving you $100 to go buy coffee, cigarettes, this, that, and the other, you can't hire a grant writer and they take some of the money. You need to go buy the coffee, whatever, whatever, whatever. So people think they could pay the grant writer out of the proposals, and you cannot do that. Definitely cannot do that.
Okay.
So I would just really say take advantage. I have never seen this many resources available to grantees as what they're providing. So just in many sessions that you can sit in on, I would do that, and then take advantage of the one-on-one with the technical assistance.
And that link has been dropped in the chat. And so it's a Calendly link. And when you click on that, you just select whatever time works with your schedule. And then out of the team of people across the, it's like maybe almost like 13 TAs, based on their availability and when your availability, you'll get connected with them. And then you can move from there to get the more direct support that you might need based off of the larger group sessions that take place for TA sessions.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
The only other thing that I would like to add is please read over all the materials. A lot of people will get an RFP and they think it could just answer the questions or write the grant. You actually need to read the RFP. If there's no one else, I want to encourage everyone to please fill out the survey. That is critical information. Please fill out the survey. Do you have anything else, Janine, that you want to add?
Nope. I'm just just be on the lookout in your email. So all those that registered, the participants for the session, you should receive an email from BCYF with the survey link. Another thing that I'm going to also drop in the chat is the general email for the BCY fund. If people have general questions pertaining to this grant application, you can always email there, and then it'll get funneled and streamlined to the best point person to better assist you. Like if you're having challenges with the links or anything else.
I did have a question in the chat.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What was it about the minimum character count?
Yeah, because we keep talking about the maximum, and I just wanted to know if there was any minimum one.
That's a great question. I have not heard that come up.
We would have to ask and find out if there's I don't know about a minimum, but we'll take that question to them and hopefully get the answer.
Thank you.
I appreciate you lifting that up. I think like you said, we mentioned the maximum so much that it clearly says minimum, but my eyes saw maximum.
That's funny.
We have a couple more minutes. Anyone else want to ask a question? Like she said, look over at the chat. There's a lot of viable information over there you want to take advantage of. You have the calendar. You have a lot of good information over there.
Patrice, how did you become a grant writer?
Ooh, I didn't give you my history. I came from I've worked in a nonprofit in the public sector, and in both areas, somehow I became a grant writer, but I worked in the governor's office. I was one of those persons, there was many of us, we wrote the federal grants to bring the money into the state. And then we flipped it and wrote the state grants to put the money out to local organizations. And so I tell people all the time, to be a good grant writer is to write the right grants. I have written grants that didn't get funded, and then I perfected how to write grants. And then I went to training. Because I worked in the governor's office, I went to a lot of federal trainings to get certified in federal grants and things like that. So, and then you just learn what to do and what not to do. One thing I do know is I will never send a grant out with someone other than myself reading it. Because, you know, when you write so much, your eyes just flow. And then I do get people to say what's in the grant. And if they can articulate what I think I wrote and what I'm reading, it's a good grant. If they can't, it's not a good grant.
Okay, awesome.
Anyone else right before we close out? And I want to thank you all for participating, especially on a Saturday morning. You got up out that bed. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Catrice, the only thing I wanted to lift up is just reminding people that the grant portal has opened. It opened on April the 15th and that it closes on May the 15th. So just being mindful of the timeline that exists to get your application in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all. Have a wonderful day.
Have a wonderful day.
Have a great day.